this happened over a decade ago, I still remember every detail like it was yesterday. I was 14 at the time, visiting a childhood friend I hadn't seen in years. We were excited for the sleepover. His parents had always treated me like family, and I was looking forward to a night of movies and video games. He lived on a 20-acre ranch, miles away from any neighbors. They had a few guns, 2 big ranch dogs, and a cat that never left the barn. That night, we were watching horror movies in the camper parked on the driveway, separate from the main house. Around midnight, we went inside to grab pizza and junk food before heading back out. My friend passed out pretty early, sometime around 2 a.m., leaving me alone to play GTA. The only light in the camper came from the TV screen. About 30 minutes later, I heard the dogs barking like crazy. At first, I did not think much of it. Maybe one of the chickens or a deer had wandered too close to the house. Those dogs barked at anything that moved. And eventually, I had to take a piss, so I stepped outside. The air was cold, and everything was dead silent, except for the dogs, still barking somewhere near the entrance of the ranch. I walked a few feet away and was about to do my business when I noticed something, or someone, standing by the tree line, watching me. The second my eyes locked onto his face, he bolted into the dark, heading toward the road. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it was probably just some drunk who wandered onto the property. Still, I wasn't about to take any chances. I finished up, rushed back inside, and locked the camper door. About another half hour passed, and the dog started barking again, even louder this time. Something felt off, so I woke my friend. He grumbled at first, thinking I was messing with him, but when he peeked through the blinds, his face went pale. I didn't even have to ask what he saw. I could see it in his eyes. He grabbed his phone and called his dad. Half asleep, his dad laughed it off, assuming we were trying to scare him. But then I grabbed the phone and told him, my voice shaking, that we were not joking. That's when he got serious. Within minutes, we heard the house door slam open, followed by the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being pumped. His dad shouted into the darkness, warning that he was armed and ready to shoot. Then we heard it, a blood-curdling scream, followed immediately by 3 gunshots. We sat frozen in the camper, afraid to move. The next thing we knew, his mom was outside, screaming for us to come to the house. We ran as fast as we could. By the time we got to the porch, we saw a man lying on the ground near the driveway, completely still. His dad stood a few feet away, gun still aimed, breathing heavily. My friend's little sister, Jacqueline, was sobbing. One of the ranch dogs, one of the ones that had been barking earlier, was dead a few feet away, its body limp. The sickening realization hit me all at once. Whoever this guy was, he had killed the dog, and he himself was now dead. We called the cops, but being out to the middle of nowhere, it took them nearly 30 minutes to show up. The whole time, we just stood there, terrified, waiting. When the police finally arrived, they confirmed what none of us wanted to believe. The man was a prison escapee from a facility about 15 miles away. He had been convicted of murdering 2 people. And to this day, we don't know why he was there or what his plan was. But I do know one thing. If the dogs hadn't been barking, if I hadn't woken up my friend, if his dad hadn't taken us seriously, we might not be here to tell the story. I was 16 when this happened. My friend, Sarah, had invited me over for a sleepover at her house. She was kind of weird, always had been, but she was nice. We've been friends since middle school, and I figured a sleepover at her place would be fine. It wasn't just us. Her little sister had a few friends over too, so we all crashed in the den downstairs. Sarah's house was a bit odd in its layout. The den was this big open space, and the second floor had a railing that overlooked it. From up there, you could see everything below. Our sleeping bags, the couch, the TV. It was late, probably close to 3 in the morning, and everyone else had fallen asleep. I wasn't tired, so I pulled out my DS and started playing Mario Party with the volume off to keep quiet. And after a while, I got bored and shut it off. I rolled over, trying to get comfortable, when I caught movement from the corner of my eye. I looked up at the railing and saw Sarah's dad standing there, watching us. He was just standing, silent, his hands gripping the railing. At first, I thought maybe he was checking on us, but he didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just stared. I lay there, hoping he'd leave. But after what felt like forever, he started making these noises, a weird mix between laughing and choking, like he was trying to hold something back. Then, he started rocking back and forth, his grip tightening on the railing, his body swaying in an unsettling rhythm. I did not want to move. I did not want him to know that I was awake. But then his head tilted slightly, and he locked eyes with me. He lifted one hand and slowly ran his fingers down his face, dragging his nails over the skin, like he was savoring the feeling. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then, suddenly he whispered something, just a single word, but I couldn't make it out. And it sounded garbled, like he was speaking through gritted teeth. And I couldn't look away. His face twisted into something that was almost a grin, and he giggled, just a short, breathy sound. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the hall to his bedroom. As he left, I swore I heard him muttering under his breath, but the words were too low to understand. I was frozen. I did not know what to do. I wanted to wake Sarah up, tell her what I saw, but what would I even tell her? Hey, your dad was watching us sleep and acting like a total creep. It didn't feel right. I told myself maybe I was imagining things, that I was just tired, but my gut told me that something was off. The next morning, everything felt normal. Her dad was already gone for work by the time we woke up. Sarah acted the same as always, like nothing happened. I kept quiet about it, but when my mom came to pick me up, I felt this overwhelming relief. I never went back to Sarah's house after that. Years later, I still think about that night. I wonder if he did that often. If Sarah or her sister had ever woken up to see him standing there too. I don't know what was going through his head, and honestly, I don't want to know. All I know is that something about it wasn't right, and I'll never forget the way he smiled at me. few years ago, my cousin had a sleepover at my house. We were always close, practically like brothers. That night, we stayed up playing Xbox and drinking ginger ale. It was around 1 a.m. when my cousin said he was going downstairs to grab another can. I barely looked up from my game and just nodded. I kept playing, lost in the matches. After what felt like a while, I realized I had gone through at least 4 matches, maybe more, and he still wasn't back. And at first, I figured he got distracted watching TV or scrolling on his phone. But then it hit me. Our house wasn't that big. Getting a drink should have taken less than a minute. I did not want to call out and risk waking my parents up. So I got up and went downstairs. The living room was empty. I checked the basement, thinking maybe he went down there to grab something, but nothing. Then I checked my dad's office. Still nothing. Finally, I walked into the kitchen, and that's when I noticed something was off. The fridge door was wide open, cold air spilling out, and a can of ginger ale was lying on the floor. It was weird, but I still assumed he was messing with me. Maybe he was hiding, trying to scare me. I called out, "All right, dude, you got me. Come on." No response. That's when I saw it. The back door was cracked open, just slightly swaying. That door was always locked at night. I stepped outside, my feet cold on the concrete patio. Our backyard wasn't huge, but it stretched back a bit, ending at the pool. And that's where I saw him, standing at the very edge of the water, completely still. "Dude," I called out, "what are you doing?" No answer. He didn't move. He did not even acknowledge me. Annoyed, I walked up to him, ready to shake him and tell him to quit being a weirdo. But as soon as I grabbed his shoulder, I froze. His face, his mouth was wide open like he was screaming, but no sound came out. His eyes were rolled back, nothing but white showing. It wasn't like he was faking it. He wasn't moving at all, not even blinking. And I felt this horrible, sickening dread settle in my chest. "Stop it," I said, shaking him. Nothing. He was stiff. Then, before I could react, his knees buckled, and he collapsed straight into the pool. Without thinking, I jumped in after him. The water was freezing, but I barely registered it. I grabbed him under the arms and kicked toward the steps, hauling him onto the concrete. He was still stuck in that awful, silent scream, eyes rolled back, body stiff. I yelled for my parents. I don't even remember running inside, but next thing I knew, my dad was shaking him, my mom was crying, and we were all rushing him to the hospital. Later, the doctors told us he had suffered some kind of violent neurological episode, possibly a stroke or seizure. I don't remember the exact medical term, but what scared me the most was that when he woke up, he had no memory of anything past going downstairs to grab the ginger ale. Everything after that was just black. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how I found him, just standing there, mouth open in that silent scream, eyes rolled back like he was trapped in his own body. And I kept replaying it in my head, over and over. I still don't understand what happened that night, The doctors gave us a medical explanation, but nothing about it felt normal. It felt wrong, like something had taken him for a few minutes and then just let him go. That was the scariest night of my life, and I'll never forget it.